Hi again, everyone, and welcome to Badger Breakdown, brought to you by U.S. Cellular. I'm Mike Lucas for UWBadgers.com. I'm joined by the voice of the Badgers, Matt Lepay. It's not unprecedented to step out of the Big Ten and play a non-conference opponent. It's been done in the past with Buffalo and Cal Poly. But BYU is a different animal. It's a good football team.
It is. I know, in talking with Barry Alvarez about this, Jim Delaney made no bones about it, no secret that he wanted his conference teams to ramp up out of conference schedules, and this was a part of the factor that why BYU is on the schedule. I know Barry talked about it's hard to get other schools with conference affiliations to free up in November, but in the case of BYU, which is now an independent, it works. This, Mike, I think you could make the argument, and it'd be a fairly easy one. It's the best non-conference team that's come to Camp Randall in at least the last 10 years.
And what a contrast, too, from the game that we saw in Iowa City last Saturday, just the slugfest, the battles on the line of scrimmage, to what we anticipate seeing out of BYU.
Yeah, it can be a physical team, but it plays fast. 90 plays a game, had 115 snaps in a game against Houston a few weeks ago, which ties an FBS record set by a Houston team a couple of years ago. So Taysom Hill, their quarterback, he's gotten a lot better throwing the ball, especially the last 5 games, leads the team in rushing. And there are times when they run that diamond formation, they have in essence 4 running backs. One of them can happen to throw the ball pretty well too, but it's been a very difficult team for opponents to slow down so far.
And by the sounds of it, Hill is finally rounding it to shape. He had to deal with an injury last year. Now his completion percentage isn't tremendous. It won't wow you, but the other things he does helps that team win.
Yeah. He's, as we mentioned, he leads the team in rushing, and in the last 5 games, he's really thrown it a lot better. He's about 65%
You have to
completion.
respect his arm.
Yep, and he's got Cody Hoffman, who is probably going to go down as the most prolific receiver in the history of BYU football. 31 touchdown catches, leads the school in career receptions, on the brink of the school record in receiving yards. There are other weapons. They'll get their tight ends involved a little bit, but again, with a lot of running backs they can rotate in there, it's a pretty good offense. It's a hot team right now.
And communication is going to be so important. It always is on defense, but as Matt just mentioned, the high tempo of this group of players is unlike anything we've seen thus far.
Yeah, the one that would be close would be Arizona State, of course, early in the season. That was a team that ran a ton of plays against Wisconsin. Maybe in that regard they're similar, but probably some differences. And I know on the flip side, BYU, on the defensive side, we're going to see some pretty good linebackers at Camp Randall on Saturday. Kyle Van Noy, one of their outside backers, one of the best in the country. He's a candidate, much like Chris Borland. Kyle Van Noy is a candidate for a lot of major individual awards. So he's one. They have others, but he's the guy, number 3, the one that you want to watch.
And we'd be remiss if we didn't bring up the type of defense that the Badgers got last week, especially in the first half, to hold them in the game and give an opportunity to beat Iowa.
Yeah. We on this segment, we usually talk about the other team, but it's worth reminding maybe ourselves as well as the viewers that the Badger defense is one of the better defensive units in the country. And what it was able to do early when that field position was awful for Wisconsin, to keep Iowa out of the end zone, which obviously it did all day, but especially early when the Hawkeyes had a chance to see some momentum, get that loud crowd on its side, never really happened fully because the Badger defense was pretty stubborn.
And when Gary Anderson was at Utah State, he obviously played against BYU. It was a 6-3 game last year, which leads us to our question.
Yeah, it does. This week's U.S. Cellular text question of the week comes from Kelly, who wants to know how much will Coach Anderson's knowledge of BYU help prepare the players. As Gary Anderson said, these guys keep following me wherever I go. 10th straight year, 16 out of 17 now in Coach Anderson's coaching career as a head coach or as an assistant. He's seen BYU. Got to think it'll help Mike just in terms of personnel background of the
more so
returning
than
players.
anything else, yeah, because the scheme's been tweaked a little bit during the offseason. BYU changed some of its coaches, and they wanted to go faster on offense, and that's been a decision that's paid big dividends thus far. Gary was 1-3, which is remarkable considering the history of his program at Utah State. He made it a rivalry. He made it important. He made that series more relevant than it had ever been.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the situation that Gary walked into at Utah State in some ways similar to the situation here when Barry arrived in 1990, and he did turn it into a rivalry. It was a loss last year, but as you said, a very close game out there in the state of Utah. We thank Kelly for your question. Send us a question. Hashtag at Badger Breakdown. If we use your question, you, like Kelly, could be in line to win a Badger prize pack, including some authentic Adidas apparel.
And I know everybody's just happy that this team is playing some home games. They'll finish strong. 3 of the last 4 will be in Camp Randall Stadium. Now you have to take advantage of it.
Yeah, it's a big time game, as you mentioned at the top. An out-of-conference game in November kind of throws you off a little bit, but this is one I think that should excite people. There's tradition at BYU. Bronco Mendenhall has had this team in a bowl game in each of his eight years there, first 8 years, and it's a good team now. And it's a team that's not in the top 25, but probably not far from it, coming in here with a 5-game winning streak.
And as a postscript to our question of the week, Mendenhall hired Gary Anderson, his first collegiate job, so he probably knows as much about Anderson football as Anderson knows about BYU football. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. Good. I think they're good friends, and obviously Coach Anderson's familiar with the program, and this is it's not a Big Ten game, but it is a big game for Wisconsin.
For Matt Lepay, I'm Mike Lucas from UWBadgers.com. Thanks for watching Badger Breakdown, brought to you by U.S. Cellular.